You're listening to the 54665, a podcast on all things small business development, rural economic development, and, of course, Viroqua, Wisconsin. This morning, we have a little bit of a rock star in our midst, Julie Emsley. She is the local WWBIC consultant and director and basically administrator and wrangler of all things WWBIC. Good morning, Julie. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Tell us a little bit, what is WWBIC?
So WWBIC stands for the Wisconsin Women's Business Initiative Corporation. So we're a statewide nonprofit that provides resources to small business owners and entrepreneurs. We've been around for about 31 years. And those resources typically fall into two main buckets, education and lending. And lending is really our cornerstone piece. So we provide small business loans ranging from $1,000 to $250,000. And then one of the things that makes our loans really unique is that we provide kind of a wraparound service. So when people receive a loan with WWBIC, they get a small business consultant that works with them throughout the life of the loan, kind of as a mentor, as a coach. So that's one of the hats that I wear in my role too, is supporting our borrowers in the Southwest region of Wisconsin. And partially too, to speak to our name, being the Wisconsin Women's Business Initiative Corporation, our mission is really trying to connect with people who struggle to access those resources. So although our resources are available to anybody who could utilize them, as an organization, we're always measuring our impact with certain groups of people we know struggle with that access. So women being one of them, again, especially since we've been around 31 years. When we first started, women couldn't get a loan on their own without a male co-signer. So, and also people of color, low to moderate income people, rural populations. Those are groups as an organization we're always trying to connect with.
Wow. So as an entrepreneur, looking at that, like you say, like anybody, I mean, can really anybody access WWBIC?
Yeah, definitely. So let me back up and say that we are the Wisconsin Women's Business Initiative Corporation. So our focus, our geographical area is Wisconsin. And so as far as getting a loan, you have to have a business in the state of Wisconsin. But we do have educational resources, online classes and so on that can be accessed potentially if you're outside of the state. And actually for the first time this year, we were also awarded the Veteran Business Ownership Center for the Midwest. So we are expanding beyond our borders of Wisconsin for the first time with that program, and that's in Minnesota and Illinois as well. So, but otherwise, yeah, anybody can access them. But that being said, going back to we're trying to connect with people who struggle to access, the place we play in the market too as well with lending, for example, is in helping people who can't get a bank loan. So that's not a definitive thing that has to happen in order for you to get a loan with WWBIC, but it makes the most sense. So when people come through my figurative doors and are looking for financing, one of the first questions I ask them is, have you talked to your bank? Have you talked to other lenders? What do they say? Because we're not wanting to compete with those banks. Our terms tend to be a little bit trickier, or there's more to them. Like our interest rates tend to be a little bit higher. We only do business loans, so our terms only extend out to 10 years at the most. So if people are purchasing real estate or property, they're going to want to go with another lender. So we're trying to really augment the work that's already being done by other lenders that are out there and fill in gaps. So on that note, I don't want to say we're not always the best choice for everybody. And in fact, if I needed financing, I'd go to my bank first. And check in there and see, and then come back to WWBIC as another opportunity, another option.
Sure. I think for startups or people getting into the entrepreneurial game, maybe even for the first time, financing is such a huge question mark. I guess on that note, what do you usually look for? What are some of the criteria if someone says, Julie, I have this amazing idea for a business. I've kind of shopped it out to a bank, but what do you need in order to make this thing go?
Sure. So financing is so interesting. This and bookkeeping are two things that I'm like, why are we teaching calculus and trigonometry in school? We should be most Americans will go on to get, almost everyone will go on to get a loan, whether it's a mortgage, car loan, whatever. Yeah. And there's such a lack of, they're so nuanced on all the things that go into it. And then same thing with bookkeeping, to understand credits and debits, liabilities and assets, and watching people who are starting a business really struggle with those things. And those are things that you have to have a good grasp on. So I guess there's a couple of things that ran through my head when you asked that question. First of all, if you go to your bank and then you're coming to me next, when I say, you went to a bank and people said, yeah, I went to my bank and they're not interested. Like I always try to find out then why, what was the big reason? And that's a tip that I would say to anybody. If you go to a bank and they say, like this isn't going to work for us, I'd really try to nail them down as to why. Yeah. And try to have a humble, a humility about you when you do that, because it's never fun to be the person that's like, oh, this isn't looking good. I don't think this is. And it could just be they don't do those type of loans. It could be your credit is funky. It could be the collateral isn't there. So that helps give me insight. Of course, those are things that WWBIC looks at, even though we are a more flexible lender, we're still doing responsible lending. So we don't want to get in a position for not only our organization to lend out money that shouldn't have been lent out, but for you as a borrower, we want to make sure that we're not giving you a loan that you're going to struggle to pay back. So with that, what are some of the main things I look at, and I know our organization looks at? And I would say, even if you're not taking on liability or, it's more important when you take on liability, and that's not just financing. It could be, having employees, getting inventory, whatever it happens to be, quitting your job.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things to me is how much have you fleshed this out, especially the number side of this. So I've heard somebody say that I think is really, really good. I tell a lot of our clients is that like money is heir to a business.
Sure.
So you need it to survive. And so, a lot of people go on to start a business or are interested in starting a business for all sorts of reasons. And sometimes that's like the last thing in their mind is like, have I done the work of putting my expenses and my revenue together? And am I going to make money at this? And I can totally appreciate folks who are like, I'm not looking to make millions. I just want to make a living and I want to do something I enjoy and I don't want to hate my job or whatever. But we know like running a small business it can be very challenging, it can be very rewarding, but it can be very challenging. So for me, it's like, that's the same thing. Like, I can appreciate somebody who doesn't want to make millions, just want to make a living, but you still need to make money. So same thing, you don't need tons of oxygen to get through every day, but you need enough to survive. And if you don't have a good handle on that or haven't done the work of putting that information together, of looking at your numbers and saying, okay, this is what I'm expecting to make in sales, and not just like, well, I'm going to open up a restaurant and I think I'll clear $1,500 in breakfast every month, saying like, okay, I think that, I'm going to charge, this is going to be the average amount of customers I'm going to see every day. This is what, an average breakfast is going to cost my customer. Here's what it's going to cost me and the food essentially on the plate. And when I do the math on that, I came to this $1,500 number. And then when I look at, and it's hard because you are guesstimating, a lot of it, especially if it's a startup business. Yeah. But putting those numbers together and looking at it. And one of the big mantras, so I always, make that a big point to our clients. And one of the things that we do at WWBIC with folks is make sure they have a good bookkeeping system for this same reason. So when you're projecting and trying to put a business together and looking at it, if you're not thinking about all of those numbers and how they put together, and at least having that part, a major part of the backbone of starting your business, like you're going to struggle because it's really important. So once you get started, same thing, having a system in place where you can look at that. So George Mosher, who's like is a pretty successful Wisconsin entrepreneur and big supporter of WWBIC. So he says, this is another quote I always tell to my clients, that if you keep good numbers, you make good decisions. If you keep bad numbers, you make bad decisions. And if you keep no numbers, you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
And so those are all the pieces. So that's one of the things that's really important to me, is to say like, okay, well, have you put together? And that can sound very intimidating, I think, for a lot of folks, the math side of it too, of like, no, but I just love this like widget, or I've got this really great idea.
Right.
But like just doing the basic math. So like, especially like in a rural community, like, your market, especially if you're doing a brick and mortar store or location or whatnot, and that's your market, or the people who are going to actually come and see you or get in touch with you directly, like in person, you have to think about that. So like, if I'm going to open up a location that's going to cost me $500 in rent, a retail store on Main Street here in Viroqua, okay, well, if I do that and I sell, widgets for $10 each, they cost me $5, I got to sell 100 widgets a month just to clear rent.
Yep.
Like, so to think about those things and to put those things in put them all together. And so it can seem like a lot to think all at once, but even just to like start with your revenue, like what are all the different ways that money's going to enter my business and how do I see that playing out?
Yeah.
And what are my expenses? What are all the different ways money's going to leave my business? And then how do those align? So like that whole cash flow, you know, and so cash is king in a small business and you need it to survive.
Right.
So, okay, so great. Like this month it looks good, but you know, January doesn't look so good,
right.
you know, or what have you. And so especially, you know, the businesses that especially need to be thinking about their cash flow on an extended timeline, you know, inventory businesses, accounts receivable businesses. So businesses who, you know, provide a service or a product up front, but don't get paid for, you know, sometimes months later. And then seasonal businesses, which I think there's an argument to me that every business is seasonal.
Yeah,
you know?
For sure.
So being able to manage that and say, okay, like I have a surplus this month, but 3 months down the road, I'm going to have a deficit in my cash flow. Am I going to have enough to carry and how am I going to float through it? So when somebody comes to me and says, I'm looking to start a business, and they say like, I've looked at the, you know, the numbers on this, you know, there's other key components. Money, marketing, and management are the 3 areas that WWBIC always kind of divides it up into. So marketing, understanding that, but like at the end of the day, money is heir to a business.
Yeah, for sure.
So is it true that anyone can start a business? And what are some of the best practices for startups that are doing a website format versus brick and mortar?
So is it true that anybody can start a business? I would answer that by saying any profession. Like, is it true that anybody can go on to be a police officer or a doctor or a bartender or a plumber or whatever, you know, or if you have the desire and you're willing to do the work, and you also like have come to terms with the challenges, like having an understanding of the challenges that come with running a small business, like, then sure, you know, so, you know, I want to be a police officer. Do I know what that means? Like at the end of the day, like, and sure, there are many people who love that, you know, love their job, love running a small business, but will still tell you there's challenges. And so just like we all have misunderstandings about any employment, I think those are the pieces. So same thing with a doctor. You want to be a doctor? Sure. You got to go to a lot of school and be able to deal with, you know, all the challenges and stresses.
So if people feel like they're not, you know, good with budgeting or good with marketing or good with some of the different aspects that come along with business, as long as they're looking to the right resources, whether it's WWBIC, their Chamber of Commerce, Small Business Administration, whatever it may be, they can do it. That's encouraging.
Yeah, I think so. You know, I mean, I think you definitely, again, I mean, I touched on this, like if you can't ignore the money aspect of it. And there are people that they have a very specific product or service that people need, and so they don't really do that well with marketing. And there are resources out there to tap into for sure, but there are pieces that you just can't ignore. I had somebody recently come to me that wanted to start a business and was like, I'm just not good with money and I just never will be. And I'm like, I don't know if you start a small business,
right?
Like that might not be the best choice for you. So yeah, so if you're willing to do the work, even so, you don't have to be good at it, but you know you have to do it, you know.
Sure.
So you know, I hate cleaning my house, but I have to do that, you know, like, so
it seems like there are hurdles, obviously, in starting a business. And I think that, you know, I look at a lot of entrepreneurs who are so gung-ho into getting into a brick and mortar space, when in reality, the opportunity might exist to be a web business, which keeps debt overhead a little bit lower and allows you to kind of develop your marketplace. It's one of the things that at the cafe we really started pursuing with our charcuterie program. Like, instead of doing a standalone brick and mortar space for it, let's do web sales and really build that test market, so to speak. Tell us a little bit about the WWBIC criteria for starting a web business versus a brick and mortar, and you know, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs considering?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think you really hit on that. So we see with people who have a brick and mortar location, one of the biggest expenses they have every month is their rent, you know? And so if that's something, and it could be somebody's expenses could be $3,000 a month and $1,500 of that is just their rent.
Sure.
Right. So if you can mitigate that or don't have the need for it, or you're just not at that stage yet, I mean, that's a significant impact to your bottom line. So it's funny that, to talk about this, like I recently was asked to talk about starting on a shoestring and the things that to assess. And on my list of things, I actually just pulled it up. There's like the fourth one was assess a brick and mortar location. Like, does this really make sense for me? Because it is a significant expense. So websites in having a web-based business is a whole nother can of worms. You're now competing with everybody online.
Yep.
And that's...
It's daunting.
That's a lot of people.
Sure.
But the trade. So I think that there's pros and cons to both. That when you have a location, so looking at that and assessing that, and then also assessing like a brick and mortar location too. Like, sure, it'll be an expense. Does it increase my sales? So I might open up a retail location versus just doing e-commerce. And it costs me $1,000 extra a month, but I'm doing $2,000 more in sales.
Sure.
So putting those things together and the impact it has.
Yeah. Do you have a bright line criteria that you would advise potential entrepreneurs to look at in regard to look at a web-based business versus a brick and mortar?
No, I mean, I wouldn't say myself. Because so many businesses are so different. Like every business is so different. And so web-based, you just run the gamut. And it's so different as far as starting a small business. If you're just going to do something that's like a side hustle and you're just, you're putting a little money towards it, but you still have your job. That's so different than somebody who's like, I'm going to take out a huge loan. I'm going to open up a location. I'm going to quit my job. Basically like, what does that look like? If all of a sudden, things didn't go well or what have you, or all of a sudden you just had to stop doing this for whatever reason, like how painful would that be?
Yeah.
And so I think web businesses, you can have, if you have a web-based business that has tons of inventory, like I have a client that's, she kind of does like the Amazon eBay thing. So she still has a lot of money in her inventory. It's all web-based. So she works out of her home and she doesn't have the cost of paying rent to someone else, but she's got other things going on.
Sure. I think it also depends on what type of item it is, whether you're selling something that's $15 or $600. There might be different needs associated with that too. Volume needs, for example, which might help to make that decision as well.
And too, with that client, so she ended up opening up a retail location a few years into her business because she's like, I have all this stuff. It's in storage at my house. I'm like, my whole basement has been, and she has like a fully built out basement in her home. It's not like mine. It's like all cement block, right? So she's like, it's all my business. And so we just need to get this out of the house. And so I can, have my home back a little bit and I can, essentially store my stuff while still having a location where people can purchase it. So I'm creating an income stream. Now, of course, when you open up a brick and mortar location, especially if you have to keep retail hours or hours of business, now you're looking at another responsibility of like, I got to be open 11 to 5 Tuesday through Friday, or whatever your hours have to be. Or now I'm probably going to need employees because this isn't just out of my house. So looking at that, understanding it's not just rent, there's other liabilities that go with that, whatever it happens to be, staffing that location and making sure, you can't just have whatever random inventory. You now have to have a full selection of items, like if people are going to walk in, like stuff like that, to look at the cost of just not the rent, but the other things that go with it. So.
Yeah. I think that those metrics are really, really important. I know that I had a little bit of background from a restaurateur in Madison who told me that if your average daily sales don't equal the amount that you're going to pay in a mortgage, your business won't float. So, Shinji had multiple locations around the city, and he said that if throughout the entire scope of the year, if you're not building your business plans on one day's sales, being able to cover your rent, you're going to be too high in overhead, and it won't work. Do you have any other, bright line indicators that you look for when you see someone's numbers in front of you for the first time? Just so entrepreneurs, when they come to you, have this sense of, is this viable or not? Because I would imagine that's a huge pressure and responsibility in your job.
It's a good question.
Yeah, definitely. And that's another thing that's, I guess, somewhat unique with WWBIC. Like one of the things we require that's actually in your terms and conditions of your loan is that you submit financial statements on a monthly basis. And this isn't, we do that not so that we can be your big brother and make sure that we're going to get paid back, but it's more, a lot of it is just because we know this is so critical for you to develop that practice and for us to help to make sure you're capturing all those things. And again, I work with so many different clients. I have Amish clients. I have people who do web-based businesses. I have brick and mortar locations in, La Crosse, which is a sizable city, one's in rural locations, So when I look at people's financial statements, I look right away and they're the expert on their business. So to me, it's more like, okay, of course you look at the bottom line and you say, okay, is this in the red or in the black?
Yeah.
And then also, like, are there things that might be missed? Like, going through the expenses, are you covering all the classic things, insurance and payroll and taxes? Are you including your loan payment? And then asking the borrower or, the business, in our case, but the business owner, and saying, like, where did you come up with these numbers? And then also the sales, like, where'd you come up with this? If we're looking at like a cash flow, profit and loss, kind of the same thing. Like, where these income, are we capturing everything here? And also, like, are you tracking in a way that's beneficial to you? Like, I mean, usually your two things you're considering when you're putting together your books, your charter accounts or whatever, like taxes, so you can, that you can report on your taxes correctly and meet those obligations, but then also to inform yourself and your business decisions. So no, I mean, it just so depends overall.
Yeah.
And then looking at it, not just at that point in time of saying, okay, this was your profit for this month, but saying like, your numbers are only as good as what you can compare them to.
Yeah, right.
So like somebody can come to me and say, look, like I made $10,000 in sales. And I'm like, great. That can mean a heck of a lot to one business and that could be a drop in the bucket to the next.
Right.
So let's look at like your business compared to other similar businesses, or let's look at your business compared to what you did this month last year. Or, one of the things I do a lot for our clients too is to take the budget that they put together, their cash flow projections, and put their actuals next to the budget to say, okay, this is what we thought was going to happen, or this is what you thought was going to happen. This is what actually happened. How did those numbers differ? And what does that mean now? Like, what does that mean moving forward? Like, you're way up on sales, or you're way down on sales, or you had this like huge maintenance problem, your truck broke down totally unexpectedly. That was a huge expense. So now we're like, so what does that mean? How does that inform our decisions moving forward?
Sure. Nora, just a quick question as the executive director of the Viroqua Chamber Main Street, looking for those comparables, those comparable numbers. Do you have resources that you would point to for startup entrepreneurs who are looking to try and understand a little bit of the numbers game or the marketing game or the pieces that they might need to go into Julie's office and make a compelling case?
Yeah, that's a good question. We send people to Julie on a fairly regular basis when we know that we have people that would benefit from some of the things that WWBIC has to offer, including some of the online training and other aspects that can help people navigate marketing and social media and networking relationships and a lot of other things. So WWBIC has a very comprehensive library and catalog of resources for people. So, in terms of how things are going with people's bottom lines with their business and trying to navigate the way that they move forward with things, the chamber is always willing to sit down with people one-on-one and have conversations about what could be done in a different way, things that could be enhanced one way or the other, and then other resources that they can go to. So we also offer comprehensive education opportunities, particularly for people just starting the business. So we're able to direct people through a 9-week process called Co-Starters to help them in navigating some of these things before they become issues. But we have plenty of people who come to us who are looking for, okay, here's where we are. The numbers are really challenging. We are beyond needing assistance from a bank or a grant. We want to start talking about succession planning or how to close our business and what those practices are. And so not only does the chamber offer that, I know that WWBIC offers some of those services as well. So it's really nice to have Julie around. I think
for multiple reasons.
For multiple reasons. I think I place, many phone calls and emails to her because it's important that we're giving businesses the things that they need, the tools that they need to be successful.
Sure. One more question quickly before I get you. I want to make sure that we give listeners a chance to get your contact information because I think that's super important. But, when you're going through the business planning stages, and this is something that I've touched on with multiple guests, I think that it's really important to talk about one of the things you just mentioned, which is succession planning or an exit strategy.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
how do you coach people into that for the first time? Because I know when my eyes were filled with stars and I was going to realize a dream,
Yep.
like, oh my gosh, I've wanted to be my own boss and a restaurateur for my whole life. And now I'm 5 years in the game and like starting to kind of put the pieces together. Like, I got to figure out a way to get out of this so I don't die in the place.
Yep.
What does that look like? Do you have any advice or tips?
Oh man, no, it's so true. And it's so like, I mentioned this, when people come to you and you're like a lot of what I do in my job too is like help bring people's feet back down to the ground and let's piece through things. Cause there's a lot of crazy crap that happens. And, you know, like I have clients that are like losing sleep because they don't know if they're going to make payroll tomorrow, you know, or they just got hit with a huge property tax bill that like they didn't see coming or whatever it happens to be. And so a lot of it is just like, you know, we call the work that we do as small business consultants technical assistance, but so much too is like that soft stuff of like, okay, I hear what's going on. I know it's emotionally charged right now and that's totally legit, but like, let's talk about what are the steps, what are the options available here and where do we go? And so a lot of what I do too, through my role is like just helping people, you know, it's an overused term, but empowering the small business owners to make the decisions. So being like, okay, I want to make sure you have all the information in front of you. So I actually have a client right now that's like at a pretty sizable project that's not going that great. There was a lot of issues that were unforeseen that she couldn't have predicted. And so the role that I'm doing with her is helping to understand like where you're at. So here's what your financing looks like. Here's what's going to happen if you close the business. Here are the steps. Here are the options, and let's lay them out and assess them. And at the end of the day, like the decision comes down to that individual. Like, when do I count my losses and move on?
Yeah.
Cut my losses?
Either
anyway,
one.
counting. You need to be doing some counting.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyways, but like, when do you, and we all have different levels of risk too.
Yeah.
You know, even between me and my husband, you know, when we're doing, you know, working on our stuff, you know, he's like, no, we could go for that. Let's get, you know, we have a couple of rental properties. We can get this next one. And I'm like, no, we need to wait another 30 years, you know, or whatever.
Right.
So for the small business owner too. So again, like going back to their number, so they're making an educated decision so they can see I am sustaining a loss and I have been for 12 months and there's no light at the end of the tunnel right now. But when you're like, it feels bad, I'm really struggling, I'm constantly digging through my couch for change. So I actually, it's funny you say this because this is a discussion. I in WWBIC, we have a team of small business consultants because we all support loans across. WWBIC's got, you know, 700 loans out there right now, for example. So we're all supporting these. So we come together and we talk about this. Like, when does somebody decide like it's time to close it up and move on? And that, I think we all just come to the conclusion that it's a lot of it is just helping them so they have the pieces in front of them and say, here's the options, here's where I'm at, I have an understanding, and trying to help them reason through this like really emotional experience.
That's amazing, because I can say as a small business owner, every bad decision that I've made, not everyone, but most of the bad decisions that I've made in a vacuum. Right.
Yeah,
or I've
totally.
made them because it's an emotional decision for me that just seems to outweigh the practicality sometimes of what the numbers are telling you. So I'm making an impassioned plea to all the listeners out there. Use the resources available to you.
Yeah.
Talk to people like Julie. Talk to people like Nora, and do exactly as she indicated, which is lay all the options out on the table so you can make a better business decision.
Before we totally wrap up, one of the things that I did want to ask Julie, you know, there are so many common mistakes that people make when they're starting a business or they're making decisions. Leave us with 3 of the most common mistakes and then ways to fix those before we go.
So I've harped on this so much, but your numbers, knowing your numbers and getting an understanding of that, and just knowing it's not going to be perfect. It's hard, but just getting that together. That's a huge mistake that people make, that they don't make a priority, or their business gets started. It's the last thing they do and is look at their books or work on their books, which I get that. That happens to me too. Do as I say, not as I do.
Right.
I think too, like, another thing is getting outside of your head and talking to other people about your business idea and really trying to, as much as you can, make sure you're creating an environment that people will tell you the truth.
Yeah, right.
You know, that, because it is very hard when people have the stars in their eyes and they come to you and you're like, I don't think anybody's gonna buy, you know, whatever this idea that you have. And I don't know. I tell people I have no idea. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't have a magic wand. Like, you're the expert on this business. If you think like selling grandma panties is like going to be a huge hit, maybe it is. I mean, maybe that's like the next thing that the hipsters are going to be all into. But like, have you done the work, and have you talked to people that, you know, like, and have you thought about this? Like, hipsters thinks it's cool, but they don't spend money on underwear, you know, or whatever it happens to be.
Right.
So that's another big one, is to get out of your head and try to see that. I don't know, what would be a third? I guess the other big thing that I've been harping on a lot lately too is time. So I mentioned that like I've been asked to talk about, like, you know, starting on a shoestring and what that looks like. And because WWBIC is a lender, I talk a lot about financing and this money thing. The other thing that's like the biggest resource that entrepreneurs and small business owners have is their time. And time is like invaluable. So how are you spending your time? And you know, with, like, if I said to Nora, well, what'd you guys spend last year on events, you know, or what did you spend last in money on, you know, advertising, you know, because you have a bookkeeping system, you could look it up and say, oh, we spent this much money. And if I said, how much time did you spend on your, and it's like, how do you, you know, or to you, Luke, you know, like, oh, how much money did you spend, you know, on these aspects of your business, and how much time did you spend? And so, like, I wish there was a way that we could, like, you know, I can always go to my bank account at the worst and be like, well, this is where my money is. But I can't, it's really hard to log that. And so to protect your time, to realize, to constantly evaluate your time, and to realize like you only have so much time too. Mm-hmm. So I think those are the things like that I would say is like, understand your numbers, where your money's coming in and out, like get outside your own head and try to, you know, and also realize like, you know, this is your idea too. So take other people's feedback. It's just like life, right? Like you're like, well, it's really important to me. I really want to live on a farm, and everybody thinks that's stupid, but it's important to me, or whatever, you know, it happens to be. Mm-hmm. And then the time aspect, like that's a key component of like, where am I spending my time? Am I guarding my time? Does this make sense? And I only have so much time.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Okay, Julie. So if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach out and access some of these resources?
So the first place I would direct you to is just WWBIC's general website, which is WWBIC.com. And I only say that because it has a listing of our classes, for example, that you can access from anywhere. And my main role is really in the Southwest region of Wisconsin. And so you can go there and find, you know, what WWBIC office might be closest to you if you're, you know, in the state of Wisconsin, or what person might be the best fit and would know your area and so on. But that being said, I always tell people, like, I'm not going to, if you email me or call me and you live in Milwaukee, I'm not going to hang up on you or delete your email. I'm going to direct you to the right person. So email is always the best way to get a hold of me, which my email is my first initial and last name. So J Emsley, J-E, M as in Mary, S as in Sam, L-I-E, at WWBIC.com. And again, that's WWBIC.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming in today and chatting with us.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, we really appreciate you. And you've been listening to the 54665, all things economic development, rural development, and of course, Viroqua.
Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun.